It therefore seems quite natural and expedient that the choice of the partner should be determined by reasons other than purely individual affection. Yet personal attraction should be decisive in a highly individualized society where a harmonious relationship between two individuals becomes increasingly rare. The declining frequency of marriage, which is to be found everywhere in highly civilized cultural circumstances, is undoubtedly due, in part, to the fact that highly differentiated people in general have difficulty in finding a completely sympathetic complement to themselves. Yet we do not possess any other criterion and indication for the advisability of marriage except mutual, instinctive attraction. But happiness is a purely personal matter, decided upon entirely by the couple themselves, and there would be no compelling reason for the official insistence on at least pretending love as the sole erotic motive for marriage if society did not have an interest in it regarding its advisability for the descendants. No matter how much love may be misleading, particularly in the higher strata, whose complicated circumstances often retard the growth of the purest instincts, and no matter how much other conditions may affect the final result, it remains true that, with reference to procreation, love is decidedly superior to money as a factor of selection. In fact, in this respect, it is the only right and proper thing. Marriage for money directly creates a situation of panmixia, the indiscriminate pairing regardless of individual qualities, a condition that biology has demonstrated to be the cause of the most direct and detrimental degeneration of the human species. In the case of marriage for money, the union of a couple is determined by a factor that has absolutely nothing to do with racial appropriateness, just as the regard for money often enough keeps apart a couple who really belong together, and it should be considered as a factor in degeneration to the same extent to which the undoubted differentiation of individuals makes selection by personal attraction more and more important. This case too illustrates once more that the increasing individualization within society renders money increasingly unsuitable as a mediator of purely individual relationships. The second view of marriage for money is that it is a variation on prostitution, in a different form but subject to the same observations as on prostitution. This view holds that it is polyandric just as much as it is polygamic, but because of the social superiority of the male only the consequences of the polygamous element, the degradation of the female, takes effect in marriage for money. Thus it seems as if marriage for money, as a means of permanently prostituting oneself, would degrade either partner that is motivated by money, regardless of whether they were male or female. However, this is usually not the case. The woman, by marrying, submits the whole of her interests and energies to this relationship most of the time and offers her personality, both the center and the periphery, without reservation. In contrast, the married man is from the outset customarily granted much greater freedom of movement while in addition withholding the essential part of his personality that is taken up by his professional interests. In accordance with the relationship that exists between the sexes in our culture, the man who marries for money does not give away as much as the woman who marries for the same reasons. Since she belongs to her husband more than he belongs to her, it is more fatal for her to enter into a marriage relationship without love. I am inclined to believe an empirical material must be replaced by psychological interpretation here, that marriage for money has more tragic consequences, particularly where sensitive natures are concerned, if it is the woman who is bought. Here, as in many other instances, the characteristic quality of money relations is displayed, namely that the potential superiority of one party leads to the radical exploitation and even aggravation of the other. Such, in fact, is the tendency in every relationship of this kind. The position of the primus inter pares very easily becomes that of a simple primus. The advantage once gained in any sphere forms the stage for a further advantage that heightens the contrast. Again, a privileged position is often the easier achieved the higher the initial rank. In brief, positions of superiority usually develop in growing proportions, and the accumulation of capital as an instrument of power is but a particular instance of a very general norm that is valid in many other non-economic spheres of power. There are, however, certain reservations and counterbalancing forces that set limits to the avalanche-like growth of superior power, such as, for example, tradition, reverence, law, and the inherent limits to the expansion of power. But money, with its absolute flexibility and lack of quality, is least suited to put a stop to such a trend. Where a relationship based on money interests exists in which superiority and advantage rest from the outset on one side, these tendencies may grow further, more radically and more thoroughly in this direction, as if other motives of a more objective and objectifying nature are the basis for this relationship. The third view of marriage for money is very clearly illustrated by that very peculiar phenomenon, the advertisement for a marriage partner. The fact that it plays a very small role that is limited to the middle classes might appear strange and regrettable. For despite the individualization of the modern personality which we mentioned earlier, and despite the resultant difficulties in choosing a partner, there is undoubtedly a partner of the opposite sex for everybody, no matter how unique, a partner who has complementary qualities and who would be the right partner. The whole difficulty, however, lies in how the two people who are, so to speak, predestined for each other manage to find each other. The tragic absurdity of the human lot is nowhere better illustrated than by the remaining single or by the unhappy marriage of two estranged people, who cannot make one another happy because they did not learn to understand each other. There is little doubt that the proper use of marriage advertisements would rationalize these conditions based on chance. Advertising in general is one of the most powerful cultural factors because it provides the individual with an infinitely higher chance of achieving satisfaction than if he were to depend upon the chance of finding the object directly. It is the increasing degree of individualization of needs themselves that makes advertising necessary as a means of enlarging the range of offers. Yet, particularly in the stratum of more differentiated people, who, generally speaking, seem to be the most dependent on it, advertising for marriage is completely out of the question. There must be a positive reason for such a repudiation of this means of finding a partner. In analyzing the published marriage advertisements, one discovers that the financial status of both parties is the real, though sometimes disguised, center of interest. This is quite logical. All other qualities of the person cannot be stated in an advertisement with any degree of accuracy. Neither the outward appearance nor the character, neither the degree of affability nor the intelligence can be described in such a way that a clear picture emerges which will incite a direct individual interest. The only factor that can be given with complete exactness in all cases is the financial situation of the persons concerned, and it is a basic trait of the human imagination to consider that quality of an object among others to be the most decisive that can be stated and recognized with the greatest exactitude and precision. This peculiar, as it were, methodological merit of money ownership really renders the marriage advertisement impossible for precisely those social strata who would need it most, because it implies the admittance of mere money interests. With regard to prostitution, we find that, beyond a certain quantity, money loses its dignity and ability to be the equivalent of individual values. The abhorrence that modern good society entertains towards the prostitute is more pronounced the more miserable and the poorer she is, and it declines with the increase in the price for her services, to the point at which even the actress whom everybody knows is kept by a millionaire is considered presentable in their salons, although she may be much more extortionate, fraudulent and depraved than many a streetwalker. This is also the result of the general attitude of allowing the really big thieves to go free and of hanging the small ones, and of the fact that the big success engenders a certain respect relatively independently of its sphere and content. Yet the basic and more fundamental reason is that the exorbitant price saves the object for sale from the degradation that would otherwise be part of the fact of being offered for sale. Zola, in one of his stories of the Second Empire, tells of the wife of a man in a high position who was generally known to be worth 100,000 to 200,000 francs. Zola narrates an incident, which must be based on historical fact, in which not only did this woman herself move in the highest social circles, but where to be known as her lover ensured a man an outstanding reputation within this society.